Okay, this is part 2, the second step of this operation. Because these were sand casted, the hex on them where you put the wrench to tighten them onto the engine has little inconsistencies on it. So what I do is just take where I see don't want to take too much because theoretically this thing's made symmetrical and it should. So you knock those off just a little bit. Don't hit the threads, you'll ruin it. So that's pretty good. Because we're videoing, I've already done this to this one in the lathe and it's all set up and it's true and it's ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to face off the front of this because what I've done down here is already true and centered. And I want the face of this to be centered flat, true with what I've already done. So I'm going to take the cut off of there first. It doesn't have to go all the way to the center because we're going to hollow it out. So here we go. I hope this doesn't bore everybody. It takes a little bit of time. This is tight. You can hear it. The way it's sounding, it's not hitting all the way around. You can tell right away. I'm going to take it to about there and stop. Take another cut. Cutting pretty true there. Then I'm going to go out and I'm going to chamfer this edge just a little bit so it's not sharp. And it kind of makes everything more true. I don't think that's correct. Okay, so that's done. Get rid of this tool. Get this out of the way. Time to counterbore it. So this is my counterbore tool to start with. I want to tighten this up to keep any slop out of the threads inside of this thing, but you don't want it so tight you can't crank it. So I'll put a little lube on there. This thing I take in until I get right to the top of this bevel on it, the taper. It seems to be just the right depth. As I'm going in, I'm going to connect with the hole that I already bored from the other side. And all of a sudden it's going to get easier to turn. Right now I got a little bit of resistance because I'm actually boring a new hole. There, I'm just breaking through it. It's easy, you can hear it. I'm going to run that right up to the top of the taper and then just a hair past it. There's the top of the taper. Now I'm just going to go a little bit more. You can see a little bit of a ring around there where that little bit more went. Next thing I'm going to do, I got this cutter that I use for hogging the center of it out. I've got a line marked right there to make sure I know how far this goes in, because if I go too far, it'll cut the whole top off of it. And then you just wasted about a $50–60 piece of bronze. viewers mentioned the fact that I wasn't wearing ear protection, but I should be. You always should, but I don't like people sneaking up behind me and scaring me, so especially when you're running equipment. So it's either wear hearing protection or lock the front door. I prefer not to lock the front door. That's it. Up to the line. Get rid of this stuff. Now I've got to bore the center of it. All this tooling I've had to modify to make it work for this project. Some of the stuff you don't, but all the cutters you usually wind up making this thing just so it'll go in the hole. And you want it to be pretty perpendicular with the part you're cutting for this operation. This is the hard part, because if you go too far with this, you've ruined the part. The idea is to go in about 1/8 of an inch and create a step for this cap to line up on. While we're here, let's have a look at this. I've taken this apart. I've taken this whole unit apart so everybody can see what it is. This is the cap that goes on the top. This is the spring. Here's the needle that goes up and down, and this washer,
the
tapered needle. This washer has circlips on it. It has a step on the shaft on the bottom. And how it works is it'll be down here at the bottom of this part. Grease comes in here and it pushes that washer up. And what puts tension on everything is this spring goes on here. And that spring rides on the top of this cap and creates pressure for the grease, to force the grease down into the engine. Anyway, that's how that works.
So what you're doing right now, you're saying you're creating that step?
I'm creating this step right here, and then I have to put internal threads in here, which is a difficult thing.
So what you just did was open up the diameter of that little...
I opened up this diameter down into the part where the grease goes down in there.
And now you're going to
and now I'm going to widen
edge.
this and make that step. And I'm going to take it out to the max dimension, and I'm going to do internal threads with the lathe to match this nut, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
So, little cuts at a time. I can look down through here and I can see what I'm cutting. About what I want to reach. Now I'm going to make it a little wider. There we go again. See down in there, it's starting to form a step. The farther I go out with it, the wider the step will be. By the time I'm done threading this, part of that step's going to disappear. Just because of the nature of the tooling I've got. I don't want to go too far with this, but I have an idea of where it has to be. Just by looking at this edge.
Because you have an innate ability to look and visualize and compare dimensions of
I know. one more and then I'm going to measure it. Now, remember to cut threads on a lathe. That dimension has to be the size of the outside of the nut. The total outside of this nut. Now, if you made it to the bottom of the threads, this would just fall in it. It wouldn't work. So, make it to the outside, then you cut the threads. You might take 2 or 3 tries to get that to fit. This I've already got set to where it needs to be. See, I'm under still a little bit, so time to take another cut. Or two. That took. Close. Another couple thousandths probably. These fine threads are only about 8 to 10 thousandths deep, so if you take a couple extra thousandths out of here, you've already blown it. There's ways to correct it. You can make a new nut and get bigger, or you can actually tap the sides of this thing and bring it in a little bit smaller and then recut the threads, which is kind of cheating, but sometimes you have to do what you have to do. Well, still not quite there. One of those things you cut and cut and try and all of a sudden the tool just falls in the hole. Okay, I'm so close. I know where this is set, so I'm gonna make it smaller and see exactly where I am. Get this thing out of my way. Okay, I'm about 3 thousandths small yet. So I'm gonna take a real fine cut and then I'm gonna thread it. Bring it back out to where it just starts touching. I can hear it right there, so I'm going to give it about a couple thousandths. Thing you got to keep in mind when you move this tool, for every thousandth you move it, it's actually taking 2 thousandths out of the part because it's cutting all the way around it. I have a feeling it's going to fall in there pretty easy now. Just perfect. Okay. Threads are cut at the point on the thread is 60 degrees. That's what these little things are. And I've ground the cutter to where it just fits at 60 degrees. And you don't want to use this cutter for cutting that because it'll mess up the point on it. You want to make sure you keep them separate. So I have to change this every time because I don't have 2 holders for it. It's not a big deal. You always want to keep this as short as you can because you're not going in very deep, but you don't want it to chatter and jump around, so the shorter it is, the better off you are. You see that in the tool's in an angle, it's because that has to be set perpendicular to the part you're threading. So you want to set that cutter to where this is lined up about like that, pretty close. And this part right here is by far the hardest part of making this part.
Tapping?
Threading the internal threads with a lathe. It's difficult. Some people are a whiz at it, but most of them have digital readouts and stuff where they know exactly what the lathe is doing.
But you're dealing with a World War II vintage lathe.
Yep. Now, because of that angle right there, I'm not going to use the tip, but I'm going to use that part of the cutter, and I'm going to cut a little bit of that platform in there that I made a little bit off so that the tool can go in and grab all the threads. Get too carried away there. Okay, now I've got to shift the lathe so that the lead screw, when you engage this, it puts a thing around this, a nut around this thing, and it makes this table feed back and forth. There's a dial right here, and you have to engage it at any one of the marks, but it has to be on a mark, otherwise you'll wipe out the threads you just did. So we're going to see how this works. Just touching that, so now I can run it in. Now you can see it's getting to the back where it's starting to hit the back, so I'm going to bring it in just to here. And I'm going to bring it out this way to engage that cutter. I want to bring it about 15,000. About there, now I want to watch this, and I want to engage it when it gets to the floor. Fits. I want to dress up the edge of this nut just a little bit. Just in case there's a little Okay, so I've managed to get the threads to mate up. It's tight, it'll be fine. A little bit of valve grinding compound, I can lap it in a little bit. It'll be a nice tight snug fit so it won't come apart in flight. Next step is to do the cross hatches on the nut so that I can put the wrench on it. The wrench I made up yesterday. It's just a quick, dirty job. It has two little ears on it, and it goes on these things. These little
Go ahead.
deals here. This wrench fits into it, and it goes around. When this is on there, it goes around this piece like this, which keeps it centered, and you can tighten that nut up. It's all stuff you have to come up with when you do this kind of work. Anyway, what I've come up with for this, so this, because everything's square and true, you center it, and then you can cut it back and forth. You can see the chips coming off, you just run it back and forth. Come across, catch the other side. Go a little bit deeper. That's how you cut the notches in the cap. That's the way I do it. I don't know if machinists are going to do it that way. Nowadays everything's animated. It has digital readouts. Pretty much automatic anymore. This is old-fashioned style, but you can see what it does. It cuts the notches in the cap.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The tool just fits right into it.
Okay.
And that's this phase of the operation. The next phase will be to drill this fitting hole and tap it so that this amylite fitting, which you buy for $10 a piece, screws into that.
So that's one part you didn't have to make on your own?
That's one part I bought, and it just screws in like this.
So once you get that third step done, you're almost ready to, then you're ready to assemble them.
Not quite.
Almost ready to assemble them.
Once I get that third step done, then I have to machine all these pins.
Oh, that's right.
I've already machined the washers. I have those done. So I'll machine the pins, put the washers on them after they're in. You can't put them on until after this pin is already in the part. And then at that point, I've bought all the springs. Just had to cut them down a little bit. And I use my digital scale to find out when it's compressed what the pressure is on it, so that during test flight, if it's not greasing enough, I know I have to increase the tension on the spring, or else put a heavier spring in it, or else make it longer, or else I have to open up the hole that this pin rides in so it can get more oil.
So you're making them based on your best estimation,
I'm guessing at it.
but it won't be fine-tuned until you actually run it.
Until I run it. I don't want to do all the test flights without these greasers on there, because there's a lot of information I need to know if we decide to go on this long tour or fly to Oshkosh.
All right.
It can't fly for more than 5 or 6 hours without stopping, so this is a must. I have to know this information. Tune in for part 3.